I guess we better figure out something to talk about, huh?
Yeah. I mean, lots of stuff going on. I mean, Bernie just won in Nevada.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hell yeah, I did. The Bernie Bro thing still going strong. Still fighting that online war.
Yeah.
Seattle PD, the cop that convinced that guy to kill himself is still just hanging out.
Very cool. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Showing up in the news.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, Greg, what are you looking at over there?
Greg?
Guys, you should take a look at this. That's right. It's a Katie episode.
No.
Okay, we're back, and we're talking Herzog, and we have a democratically elected, this is very important, colonel of the Sticker Brigade, M. Lockhart. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here.
The colonel is here.
Democratically elected.
The democratically elected colonel for life is here under an assumed name, M. Lockhart, codename Colonel M. Lockhart. Yeah.
AKA Bernadette Waters.
Ooh, yeah.
AKA Switchy Foot.
Depends on what time zone and what particular mission.
I think I'm going with Switchy Foot. It's rare to have a blessed troop on the boat with us, so we're very happy about that.
At ease,
Thank you
gentlemen.
for your service.
Yes.
At ease.
We support you.
Never forget. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming, Em. Yeah, really excited to have among us someone who has, put in the time in the trenches, been there on the front lines in the war against Seattle progressive, liberal, leftist, columnist, Katie Herzog. Yeah, tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, Katie Herzog. She sucks. She was a big dummy.
Yeah.
Katie Herzog. Yeah, me and some people have been
The brigade.
The brigade.
Seattle Sticker Brigade.
Seattle Sticker Brigade. Like me and the troops, we've been making stickers and putting stickers on stranger boxes throughout the town, and also silk screening on those said stranger boxes and having them being torn down only to be reinstalled the next day. It's a lot of work, but it's for God and country. So,
And whatever do these stickers say?
well, so the stickers say at the top say that Katie Herzog is a transphobe.
What?
And that's actually something that I feel is consistent. I think that's like a good branding, motto, I guess. Because I will admit, there are these stickers that exist on Capitol Hill that say Katie Herzog in parentheses, stranger staff writer is a transphobe. And I didn't do that. We had nothing to do with that. But I heard enough of people on the internet talking about whoever making these stickers should make more stickers. And we just took it upon ourselves to just start making stickers and just chose to put them on stranger boxes because we figured the people who read the stranger should know. I feel like it's, I think we're doing like a service to our city, especially people who claim that they are against any sort of transphobia or any phobias involving marginalized people.
Yeah, in Seattle progressives.
Yeah,
in
Seattle
other words.
progressives,
Yeah.
Dan Savage.
Yeah. Well, you basically just described our beat on this podcast, which is, exploring exactly what this Seattle progressive thing even is and what it means and the dark underbelly of it. And one of those dark underbellies is Katie Herzog.
Perhaps the darkest.
So now you said you heard our last Katie episode, right?
Yes.
That was what? That was like November and that one was about
The binary.
Yes, that was her absolutely fucking brain dead post on. It was when Washington changed the IDs to allow an X for gender nonconforming people to have something besides the M and the F to put on their license.
Yeah, self-identified
And
gender markers. Yeah.
yeah, and she had a take from earlier in the summer about when New Hampshire had done the same thing. That was absolutely fucking just so fucking brain dead. So easy to tear apart, and I think we had a lot of fun tearing them. But we've been Katie Herzog has been on our radar for a while.
I think the first episode you and I did together.
Yeah, just alone, just the two of us. Yeah,
Katie Herzog eats her shoe.
Katie Herzog eats her shoe, where we talked about her bizarre defense of Jordan Peterson. And that sort of leads you to understand like why she is so on our radar. Is she does really, perfectly represent this idea of this Seattle liberal that is actually very like an unexamined sort of conservative worldview that it's essentially right wing, and you can see that in there where she weirdly and pointlessly defends this reactionary all in the name of like free speech and asking questions. She's always just asking questions.
Her and Alex Jones have that in common.
Hey, we're the Alex Jones of Seattle. Don't you take that away from us.
We still podcast shirtless, unlike Alex Jones, who's become too chicken to do his radio show shirtless.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like as we've sort of delved deeper into her and followed her along, by the things she writes about, she always does present this frame of like, I'm just asking questions, like, hasn't anyone thought this stuff through? But it's always very lazy, and she never really follows through with this stuff in good faith. But I think what we've come to find is like you can understand, like you can guess what her YouTube algorithm is like, right? Because what are the things that are always on her radar? Free speech, political correctness, campus radicals, being too liberal to defeat Trump and just in general, race science, canceled rights.
Wait, so by campus radicals, is it like people on BMX bikes?
If only.
Or is it the new radicals, where it's what you got was what you give?
Oh yeah.
I wish. If only when she looked up campus radicals, if she had accidentally been sent to a New Radicals video, so much pain could have been avoided in this city.
When you put all that together, you understand that she's clearly like on a heavy diet of, right libertarian, red-pilled podcasts, websites. Like this is what we understand, and I think. But it's what we talk about in the last one, we use the sort of jumping off point, that she uses, of, the self-identified gender marker.
Which actually recently just got done because it was been made very easy for me to do.
Oh, well,
Mm-hmm.
hey.
So now it has an F on my ID now.
Hey.
I didn't even need two doctor's notes.
Hey,
nice.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, when it comes to changing my gender marker on my social security card, I still need those notes.
Yeah.
So gatekeeping still exists.
Yeah.
Well, and this was sort of the irony of Katie's argument, right? Which her whole thing rested on the fact that scientifically there's only two genders or whatever, the usual shit. But on this idea of like the ID is important because that's how people are supposed to, identify people or whatever. Which was this funny like anti-argument of like, well, of course, if you like present as female, present as male, like it actually for the purposes of an ID, it makes way more sense you put that on there than
wasn't
that's
there-
not, like the other thing can only be explained in a political context. It
Yeah.
can't be explained in an identification context. It would be the opposite of helpful.
Wasn't there like a thing about like ambulances like needing to know what gender you are?
Yeah,
or something? Like something really stupid.
that's
like
There was a
that?
lot of
Scissors
really
for it, yeah.
tortured examples that she gave that didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
But I think the key, though, in all of it, like we just had a hell of a time just ripping it all apart, basically every word in every sentence. But at the end of the day, like the thing you take away from these arguments that we don't need to like recapitulate is how lazy and disingenuous they are. She presents these like, I'm just asking questions like, have we thought through like, or didn't you know the dictionary says this thing? As if these thoughts that are coming like out of the cloud of pot smoke in front of her in like a word bubble exist in a vacuum, and that there isn't, first of all, decades of academia, and then a decade plus of Tumblr, and the fucking lived experience of like an enormous number of people who are have asked and fucking answered these questions, and there is a framework that she could figure out, learn about, have a little fucking empathy.
100%.
But she doesn't. It's just these posts she fires off with these absolutely disingenuous arguments, and but I want to. When I remember when we listened back, it's so we spent so much time just tearing apart all her dumb little arguments that I don't think we necessarily actually covered in that episode, like what the essential sort of exclusion that was happening, like, because I think we sort of took it for granted. But when I listened back, I realized, like, she's saying blah blah blah, ID doesn't ID gender, it IDs sex, and sex is a biological fact. These are all things we tore apart very easily, right?
Yeah.
And she tore apart herself.
Well, yeah, I mean, oh god. But what she never brings up when she's saying all this, what she just does not engage with at all, is that this essentially, pretty clearly, excludes trans people from just existing in society.
Yeah.
That if you are saying, what she's saying is, it says sex on the card, so it should be about your genitals or whatever.
What a dumb nerd thing to say.
Oh yeah.
So it's so fucking pedantic.
So this is high school libertarian shit,
Yeah.
right? Just know it all fucking libertarian.
When it had like 8 footnotes, it was like mammals normally are binary except for when they're not. And
Yeah, it's not even an argument. She contradicts herself constantly and hedges. But at the end of the day, like the key thing here, how we know that she is a transphobe, is because she said it should, people should be made basically to have, or she argued, she put, and in some places, she used other voices to argue this position. She always hedges. She made it about a political argument, but the line she was putting forward was, they should say, the ID should just say male or female based on biological sex, whatever that is, without ever asking, well, then how does that affect a trans person just living in society?
100%. Like, those are huge milestones in a trans person's life, is like getting your name legally changed, getting your gender marker changed. And thank God that the state is like one of the few states that has like the non-binary gender marker. Because not a lot of states have that. I think it's us in Portland or not Portland, but Oregon.
Yeah, Oregon, yeah.
The state of Portland.
When Washington did it, they were the 13th state.
13th. Yeah. And I think that's great, because I think a lot of a lot of non-binary people do get overlooked in these times specifically. Like, I think non-binary people specifically are easy target, especially for somebody like Katie. And I think just like being trans itself is an easy target, but I think especially like within like even like the queer community, non-binary people can be a very easy target and very easy to ignore and validate.
Yeah, I think that's where we concentrated mostly in that episode. But I mean, it even sort of her logic that she does not explore even really just for a trans woman or a trans man, like, presents real problems. Like, basically, she does not explore the fact that this doesn't always give every trans woman and trans man, like, the, what we talked about in the episode, these things, this marker that's on your license that's going to follow you in every part of your life, your
100%.
job and whatever. And, what does that mean for you? So you were just saying you just got that marker changed.
I just
How
got it
big is that
changed.
for you in your life?
It's huge. It was something that I just did because like I came out like almost 4 years ago, and I think the first year I got my name changed was a huge deal. Like I cried in like the courtroom. But I kind of just like, embarrassingly, I put off the gender marker part because I knew that, I'd have to either get like a physician involved or I had to get like my therapist involved. And it just seemed like a lot to do. And once I found out how easy it was, like I was really happy that I got it done. And, and there is systematically, there's like these things in place that like prevent trans people from like having something as simple as like their gender identity on their ID or like their name like on a social security card. And like I used to think about like before I got my name changed, I was like terrified about, because I ride a bike, I was terrified about the idea of like getting hit by a car only because like my tombstone would just have like my dead name on it. And it was just like it was something that like I needed to get done. And I feel that way about like, like it may sound silly, but I feel like that way about the gender marker as well. Like,
Well, I'm sure it sounds silly to Katie, but not to us.
Yeah. Well, and I think, too, the thing about being able to say control your name or your sort of gender marker on your ID, too.
Yeah.
It's a question of, like, who gets recognized as sort of like a full citizen, right? I mean, it was the question of sort of like in the civil rights movement of trying to, register like black people to vote. The issue wasn't necessarily that there was a good person for them to vote for. It's an acknowledgement that these people are full like citizens or humans and deserving of rights and things. Whereas when you deny people access to, on official state documentation, you can't even like say who you are. You live in a purgatory then, right? Because say you get hit, on your bike or whatever, and they pull out your ID and, like, oh, who the fuck is this person? Things don't match, right? And it's like, who the fuck is this person?
Yeah.
You exist in like a weird legal purgatory. And that's a political question of whether you put people in that purgatory or not, right?
Yeah,
it's a choice.
And Katie's avoiding that political question, right? She's making it for people, but in like the most like, devious sort of rat-like way possible of like, I'm not going to actually stand fully on my 2 feet and say this. I'm just going to say, I'm just asking questions. What if we just put trans people in the ocean? Like that. I want to put this awful idea in the air because I want to advocate for it. I'm such a fucking coward. I'm going to do it under the asking questions.
And doing that in the
banner.
context, not engaging with these things in the context of, real people living their lives, but also a movement of people trying to change society so that other people, that more people, that all people can live as themselves their lives. And this idea of wanting to just be on the conservative side of that, the wrong side of that, not being able to look ahead and think like, I see how social changes in the past have been good things, and I can look back and see that I personally have benefited from them, and that should give me some skepticism about the sort of traditional wisdom or whatever. But just none of that curiosity, none of that self-awareness, which brings us to the horror that I uncovered in a certain local paper this week. Yes, we're doing it again.
This was more and more people identify as queer.
Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
Clear in quotations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is
Square
important.
quotes, yeah.
Well, you always know. Katie usually with her headline lets you know what you're in for right off the bat, and this one is going to be a treat.
I was half asleep and listening to my local NPR station Tuesday morning when I heard the following statistic come over the air. Over half of Evergreen State College students, according to a report from KNKX, identify as LGBTQ. Had the reporter said half of Evergreen's drama department is queer, I might have turned over and snoozed through it. but over half of the entire student body?
What?
I just love, like, this is so quintessential Katie. This is
Her
like
bow
a peek
tie is
into
spinning.
her life. She's like, as I rolled over to grab my bong at noon out of bed, and it's like this is where from whence her column springs, right? It's just whatever random things like intersected me in
On that day.
me like between like showering and breakfast, you know, not like I heard a thing on NPR and now I'm writing, which is basically how all like shitty columns are written, even in the New York Times.
True.
But like,
Yeah.
but it's just funny.
Yeah, and this hits all her. It's got all of her calling cards too, as we'll see. So,
Well, and we should just point out too that like Evergreen in the state of Washington is like saying nationally like Berkeley or whatever, right? Like it's clearly like those freaks over there, kind of like, you know, whatever. Like
Mascot's a gooey duck.
That's what you're like putting in the air. You know, like it'd be like a. You know, at Berkeley College. You know, if you're doing like a Rush Limbaugh thing, it'd be like at Berkeley they did that. But this
is a
that,
Fox. You could reprint
Washington.
this like with a few edits, you know.
on My Northwest.
On My Northwest, because this is a Fox News grandpa talking about. This is the campus radical, like these, you know, kids on campuses, these cultural Marxist professors.
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah, exactly.
This is, you know, but whatever. All right, let's get into the meat.
So she
here.
goes on. That's around 2,000 students. It was surprising enough to jolt me awake. Okay.
Yeah. Just in a cold sweat, just so scared.
The population of LGBTQ people in the U.S. is expanding. That's abundantly clear. In 2018, so this is where she pretends to be a friend to the left.
Yeah.
In 2018, Gallup estimated that a record 4.5% of the U.S. adults count themselves as lesbian, gay, bi, trans, or queer, a slight jump from 2012 when the estimate was 3.5% of the population. That 1% jump was significant, but not a shock. Where things have really changed is among younger populations. A 2017 GLAAD poll found that 20% of respondents ages 18 through 34 identify as some variation of LGBTQ. That's huge and far outnumbers any prior generation. So it's worth asking, what's going on with the youth?
Like, what the fuck?
What is happening?
Like, what the fuck? Like, it should stop at like. Shouldn't it like be something that like is great that's happening? Shouldn't that isn't that something that like we are like essentially like fighting for?
Well, that you would never
we're gonna find out.
Yeah, you would never assume for a second that maybe just like more people were like always LGBT,
Right.
But, like,
Yeah,
that
exactly.
Bible wasn't accepted. But that last paragraph, though, if you thought about it like in a typical sort of right wing frame, if you just replace all the LGBTQ stuff, it's the exact same thing people say about like Muslims and like towns in the Midwest, where they'll be like, oh, you know, and wherever Minnesota it was 3% Muslim 10 years ago. Now it's 3.5% Muslim. But look. Those kids, though, a lot of them are kids. You know, it has sort of that kind of like fear of it, like that ring to it of like, let me throw some numbers at you so you know this is a growing problem. You know,
we should also say, like,
the skies are getting darker, guys. Be scared.
Like a lot of Katie articles, some innocent soul could read this as fairly innocuous, as just asking questions. Someone who is not maybe doesn't have their antennas up in the same way that, say, the trans community. Or just cranks like us have, you know? And this is something I've heard from friends, actually, who've heard us talking about Katie Herzog and gone, you know, well, gosh, I remember that the Detransitioner article from 2017 that got everyone's hackles up, that first sort of alerted people to her transphobia or, you know, suspected transphobia, and but I've had people say, well, I read that and it seemed very innocuous to me. I didn't think anything of it. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I mean, I read it like it came out, I think probably a couple months after I came out. Like I came out like in June of 2016, and I remember around that time I had a very close friend who actually like helped me come out, who's also a trans woman, basically yelled at me and validated my transness. And being a very newly out trans woman, it really fucked me up. And it like kind of gave power to a lot of internalized transphobia that I'm still like dealing with to this day. And I remember reading that article, and I think I got past like probably like 2 paragraphs, and I had to put it down. It was like very painful because I knew that language, and I knew where it was going. And it took like a lot of people, a lot of my friends online, and a lot of my friends in IRL, and talking about like how fucking gross the article was. And even like people like Julie Serrano spoke about how harmful the article was. And I think that's when I think people in the trans community and like the queer community in Seattle like really found out like who she really was, and like the mask was off, so to speak.
Yeah. And so just like that one again, so like I said, I had, friends who read that and said, you have told me now, like, I didn't get it really, but it's about the language, and it's about having an eye that where you pick out what is the way things are being presented and what's just being left out, because this is what we saw in the last one, and that's what we're going to see in this is, these are perfectly reasonable topics to, write an interesting exploration of, to actually delve into with curiosity and maybe with some sensitivity, maybe with an eye toward perspectives of people who it actually affects, but that's not what we get here. And hopefully with your help, Em, we will be able to like suss out the toxicity in this particular pile of shit.
Yeah. I will just say that up front that she has like this like idiot's like authority to like vibe to this, like as a homosexual.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's worth just highlighting what you guys have both just said, which is that Katie writes in this sort of duplicitous way, which again we've described as the just asking questions sort of method, right? Where when she says something, maybe as like a normie dude walking through the world or whatever, you're not picking up necessarily what she's saying. But for somebody who is, in the community or whatever and is aware, it hits your ear a lot differently. You're hearing the like notes of, bullshit that's kind of running through. And it is important to note that, as Katie would tell you herself, right? She's like part of the LGBTQ community, so she's aware. Yeah, she's not the normie dude walking in the world who's just mindlessly oblivious, right? Yeah, she's aware what she's doing, right? Yeah. And it's done in such a way that it gives her plausible deniability, but that just only makes it grosser, like what she's doing.
Yeah, she's not a 55-year-old New Yorker man writing for Time magazine in 1995. Okay, like.
Do you have somebody
despite
in particular?
All appearance?
I mean, like if she had any fucking curiosity or the inclination, she could be talking about these things in a way that brought people into the conversation.
Sure,
but let's go on. Let's
see
where we're.
I would quickly add. Conversely, I think this also works as a dog whistle to the people that eat the transphobia up.
Yes.
So it's doing both. It's violence and it's courting. Those people. So she continues. She's still kind of our friend here, still pretending to care. The obvious answer is that as society has become more tolerant of sexual minorities, the number of people willing to come out has increased. This makes intuitive sense. The movement for gay rights.
That's so Katie. Oh my God.
The best kind of sense.
My brain is tingling.
She starts at the obvious answer, meaning the thing that just occurs to me now, and I'm just going to the thing I'm thinking makes intuitive sense, which it makes it worthy of writing about for some reason.
I guess so. The movement for gay rights has been remarkably effective. Only 35 years ago, nearly 60% of Americans thought that same-sex relationships, not marriage, just dating, should be illegal. By 2019, that number had fallen to just over a quarter. At the same time, acceptance of same-sex marriage has risen from 27% in 1997 to 63% in 2019. The closet doesn't exist for many young people today. They don't need to come out because they were never in it in the first place. That's progress, and it's something to celebrate. But
so before we even get to the classic Katie butt, notice like this sum up does again, because we are cranks who are listening for what is being left out here. The politics are completely left out of this, and there's no discussion here of movements that worked to do this. People made decisions about how they wanted to live, how they wanted to see other people live, how they wanted their society to be. They made moral decisions, and they acted them out in the world, in their own life, and then in activism, in the fucking streets. And they did it for decades. And that is... so... But she just cites that's progress as if this is... And this is this very Seattle progressive, like, classic idea of, like, just... As we move toward
The moral arc
future,
of the universe.
And she's like, I can admit it, y'all. It's progress.
Yeah, exactly.
We're progressing, y'all.
Well, so far we're just talking about
Yeah.
the historical
Yeah.
gay rights movement, from which she has benefited as a lesbian woman. So now she has those associated rights. She can even get married if she wants to.
But Greg, we missed.
But
But she's benefited, so
Yeah.
therefore it's done. No need to go any
now
further.
everything. That's it. Yeah,
I got mine.
Game over. Now comes the but. And she just summed up everything that she doesn't understand the politics of, that she has benefited from, that allows her to live her life in this otherwise fucking fascist society because she is also rich, allows her to live, this life that she wants to live, and good for her. But
I don't think that tells the whole picture.
Hell yeah.
It's not just that more people are coming out as gay, lesbian, bi, or trans. It's that the definition of queer, in quotes, has expanded to include basically anyone who has anything other than penis and vagina missionary position sex.
so I don't think it's that hard.
Mean.
Even if you are, even
Let's
if
do a
you're
quick
not
poll of the room
super,
about this.
even if you're not super attuned here, I think you can pick up that she's saying that she's against this. Okay,
Yeah, right.
She is skeptical of this. So let's think about what she's skeptical of. The definition of queer is expanding. A cultural idea is changing.
For the better. We've
Expanding
already heard
to
for the
allow
better also.
more people to live in a way they want to live. Let's just forget the content. A cultural concept is changing. And again, we come back to the exact location of the butt there, and it's exactly after she got hurt. Fucking incredible.
Yeah, she's special. Queer, again in scare quotes, has become less and less a descriptor of who you sleep with than a way of signaling one's political ideology.
Ooh, virtue signaling. Okay, you know what? There's nothing to that, but the problem is the problem she has with it. We'll get into that later because she goes back into the politics of it much later at the end of the piece.
As Sophie St. Thomas, doesn't sound like a real person, but wrote last year in Cosmo, yes, that Cosmo, which
No
like
way.
which
Not that one.
which
Can't believe it.
like nearly every mainstream media organization has moved to the left on social issues. The vagueness of the term is intentional. Queer is an identity created for anyone outside of the heterosexual norm and meant to be inclusive and create a sense of acceptance. It's perhaps ironic, then, that actual homosexuals are sometimes left out of this inclusive definition. For
Fuck
instance,
you. Fuck you.
Sounds pretty fucking reasonable.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Yeah.
Basically,
Way to go, Cosmo.
Yeah.
Wait,
Sounds good, even.
talk about Cosmopolitan magazine?
Okay.
that is an important idea, I think, and it's because in this new paradigm that Katie fails to be able to grasp and has such fucking anxiety about, where people are able to, live their lives in these new ways that people were not able to before, as the gender they want to, and sexuality they want to. Straightness becomes a narrower and narrower and frankly fucking unlikely proposition in the first place, okay? So you kind of need something outside of that. And that seems to be what, Cosmo here is identifying as queerness. Okay, let's go on and hear the next part.
Okay. So, again, remember, this is ironic because homosexuals are sometimes left out. For instance, Mayor Pete, whom Masha Gessen and other queer writers have deemed insufficiently queer because he wears khakis and because the only man he slept with is his husband.
Yeah, that's the only problem with them.
So, to be clear, I don't know what those particular writers said, but I think, I'm not here to entertain the like Pete's not gay shit or whatever.
Yeah, no
but
kidding.
that's nonsense.
Yeah, complete nonsense.
I think I know that queer thinkers do have there is out there, which of course Katie's not going to engage with at all, a critique of assimilation
Yeah.
that is valid.
Which we've talked about with Dr.
Yeah.
Kevin.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'm sure if you're to look into that critique of Pete Buttigieg, some issues of him being like, probably in the CIA and stuff like that probably came. I imagine there's a little more to that critique. But yeah, I mean, the stuff that we talked about with Dr. Kevin is important. And I think one of the things that he had discussed too was there was always this tension in the sort of gay rights movement between, sort of more radical left and quite frankly, like white upper middle class portion that really just wanted to be like okay in their jobs. And, for Katie, the whole, X amount of people accept gay marriage or whatever. For her, I imagine that she's like, yeah, that's me and my partner or whatever. We can achieve a level of, heteronormacy or whatever through like marriage or whatever. So this idea of like a queer identity that maybe rejects those, particular like structures, she feels threatened by, right? Because I gave the door open for me to walk through, and now you guys are trying to fuck up the building where,
Totally.
Palace, right?
Katie and Pete are both cis and both white, and they don't have to like deal with like what like people of color within the queer community have to deal with, and they're queer or they're gay out of like, and they'll bring up their gayness out of convenience. Like Pete will use it as like a way to like make himself more appealing, and like Katie uses it apparently to write articles like this. But it's purely like only just like a way to just like validate any garbage that she spews about this subject specifically.
Yeah, well, and as people who, because, Katie were like white and fairly well off, and I think Washington, right? And because Mayor Pete like has never, he's never going to suffer for anything in his life or whatever. I think they buy into the sort of, this is classic reactionary shit. They buy into the current status quo because they're currently benefiting from it. And the idea that other people who haven't historically benefited from that might say, well, I don't want to be let into the status quo. I just want it to change, right? I want to like change fundamentally.
Yeah.
They all of a sudden become the threat, right?
And this is a political critique.
Yeah.
This isn't an aesthetic or a personal thing. People with this, critique of gay assimilation do not like necessarily resent Pete for being a dork,
Yeah.
It's that exactly where that butt landed. It's that with the Supreme Court legalizing gay marriage, a certain kind of assimilationist homosexuality became okay in the middle class in all of its modes, like is now part of that status quo, and then we can stop there.
But like
that's the critique.
Pete also uses his homosexuality to be racist. So
Yeah, it becomes this, excuse, for his, reactionary behaviors or whatever. A way to claim like, oh, I didn't like fire the one like black cop in South Bend because I'm racist. I mean, how can it be racist? All right, it gives like a little shield to hide behind. But outside of using it for that, like, I don't know that Mayor Pete's too interested in like, challenging the gender dynamic status quo in any way, right? Because again, he's currently benefiting from the status quo as is. So
not as much as he'd like.
Not as much as not as much as he'd like after Nevada, that's for sure. But like, I think a lot of these people inherently understand. Like, Katie inherently understands that if elements of this world changed, where she had to actually compete with people on an even footing, like say for publishing space, that she would not be the winner in that, right? Like, I think at some level she understands she's a fairly mediocre person, right?
Oh, 100%.
So I don't think that she's too interested in opening up the ranks. But.
So now we get to go maybe into a definition here. What does it mean, really, this term, scare quotes, queer? Started out as a descriptor, then a slur, then was reclaimed by gay, bi, and trans people, and now it's evolved into near meaninglessness.
Which is the highest crime for Katie.
Right.
Like, I can't look this up in the dictionary and get like a solid answer from God, you know,
Yeah.
or only God being Webster's dictionary.
Yeah, being a
Took her-
textualist.
Yeah, it took an extra 30 minutes to get this article started because she couldn't begin with Webster's dictionary says.
Queer now includes straight men who like to get pegged by their girlfriends. So yeah, now the grievances come.
Yeah.
Kinky people, poly people, people who don't have sex at all, asexuals. People who only have sex with those they're emotionally attracted to, demisexuals. People who only have sex with those that they are intellectually
The length
attracted
of this
to.
list is part of the grievance,
This is
right?
well, yeah, and this
I
is
don't,
a
I
dog
don't
whistle.
think sapiosexuals is a part of being queer. Let
Yeah.
me just say that right.
Also, no, she throws in some.
Yeah, she just
some-
went onto Tinder and found like a bunch
Yeah.
of like words that she didn't like and just threw them on the list.
Right. Also,
basically.
just otherwise straight, kinky people. The woman who pegs her husband. I'm gonna guess that not many people think of that as queer in the queer community. I'm just gonna go out on a limb and say that, but of course she's throwing this in here.
Nor is it a let's just say recognizable or in the open social category. Like that's not a dudes getting pegged lobby.
Right.
Like
I should
this
clarify.
is a thing you do in your life. It's not a political statement. You know.
Yeah, and I should clarify for those specific reasons. I don't think that alone is why, but again, she does not interrogate the actual reasons, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the entire and ever-expanding non-binary family, which the last time I looked included dozens of subsets. There's a link. Like agender flux, and androgyne, aporigender, bigender, butch, demiboy, demigender, and demigirl. And that's just the first few letters under the NB umbrella. Queer is so expansive that it can include nearly everyone, including people who are actually straight.
It's like she's like some kid who learned the universe was expanding and had a panic attack. You know, I mean, it's obviously designed to shock, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's like she, I think later in the article she brings up that like she's not gatekeeping. This is the definition of
Yeah.
gatekeeping.
Oh
Absolutely.
yeah.
It's like somebody in the party that's like, hey, I'm not racist, but check out this racist thing I'm about to say.
Oh,
Well,
sure.
I mean,
Katie's
what possible reason would we have to think that she is non-binary phobic?
Oh, she's, yeah.
Yeah, well, and again, it's interesting. I mean, to ask like, to what degree does any of this impact Kate? Like, again, if there was dudes getting pegged to lobby, to what degree this impacts Katie as a gay woman in any way, other than the fact that, again, it fucks with her political project, which is this maintenance of a fairly like Protestant status quo, and maybe we should get back to the point she brought up earlier that like queer was a political identity. And it's like, yeah, political identity making a project that invests in a
comes back.
project that you don't want.
Yeah, that comes back at the end.
Yeah.
But it's also true that queerness has become something of a trend. Okay, here's
Folks, it's a trend piece now.
Well,
I suspect I will be accused of gatekeeping or even homophobia for saying this, but it isn't a value judgment as much as an observation. Yeah, so that's the cover for this bullshit too.
well, I guess like if you're just looking at it as like, oh, this thing's becoming more popular. I mean, like, isn't like any sort of gender acknowledgement a trend? Like, I mean,
And that's a dog whistle in itself.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The listing, all of the possibilities there. Yeah, it's all a dog
it's straight.
whistle.
I mean, I remember hearing this shit in probably the late 90s, early 2000s in suburban Bothell from people.
Right.
And she will go on.
It's a very suburban middle class like eye roll.
Yeah.
The whole
That this
thing is
is
a
a
fucking
choice.
eye roll.
Yeah.
And like, oh my, like, can you believe these kids? And it's very much the like, oh, these kids on campus. This is a Fox News grandpa
Yeah,
shit.
it is completely, yeah. And the next part is one of the most insidious, I thought. So she says, humans are social animals, and we have a tendency to mirror behavior we see around us. This is sometimes
This
called...
is her amazing like evolutionary
Yeah, this is
psychological
like
anthropological shit.
Richard Dawkins
Yeah,
or
it's
fucking
so
Jordan
great.
Peterson
I
or
love it when
something.
she goes down this road.
It was like the whole like lobster argument.
yeah,
completely.
That's probably what her
Guys, we're mammals. Let's not forget. Let's not forget we're mammals.
You and me, baby.
Yeah.
Social contagion. How's that for
Whoa.
for a thing to throw around in an article like this?
I mean, that's to even call that a dog whistle.
yeah, that I mean, incredible.
I
truly
frequently
incredible.
like to talk about groups of human beings and the language of like germ theory. Can't imagine that going bad.
Yeah, it rocks. And it shows up in particular among the young. So again, we have like the teenage moral panic here
For
from
the children.
the rainbow parties.
So this is
and
it's a
whatever
rainbow
other
party
bullshit.
trend piece.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
So here's where she starts indulging her own past for evidence of trends. So I saw it in my own friend group in college in the early 2000s.
First off, I'm already calling lie right there.
Yeah.
Katie has no friends.
First, Sarah came out, then Emmeline, then Leah, then Rachel, and then me. Today, the other four are married to men, but they all called themselves lesbians, in scare quotes, while we were in school. And if queer, in scare quotes, hadn't still been a slur, they probably would have adopted that one, too.
And fuck them.
Is she lamenting the fact that queer is not a slur word anymore?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
She's like, well, back then.
What I love that it just never occurs to her for a second when she's like, yeah, my friends, call themselves lesbian in college, but some of them are married to men now or whatever. But it never occurs for a second. They're like, well, maybe your friends like sexuality is like a little more complex and evolving than you think it is.
And
right?
that- And that, she says, well, if queer had been available as a positive term, they might have adopted that. But she doesn't think beyond that to think, oh, actually, the terms of our society have changed more than just in the language, which is, of course, all she fucking cares about. Such that maybe, just maybe, some of those friends of hers might have had if they'd been in a different society 20 years later that was more open and there were more options available for those women, they might have chosen to take some of those wider options.
Yeah, and also, like, queer is not a new thing. Like,
No.
people were calling themselves queer back then, too.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
this is ridiculous.
Yeah, well, Katie's your friends. Maybe they weren't in that scene. I don't know, but yeah, it is one of those funny things. Well, lamenting too, like, well, maybe your friends calling themselves. Maybe that is a more like suitable category too for your friends.
Also, you could be a lesbian and be bi. That's a real thing.
Sure,
Like,
yeah, like
maybe they still do. Like, also, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Katie, who gives a shit? Who cares if they married men? Fuck you.
Well, and a lot of this too is like, again, it's that accepting of the sort of like 20th century like middle class nuclear family frame, which we keep bringing up Dr. Kevin because he talked a lot about this, but like really prior to the 20th century, like categories weren't that tight, as he told us, like,
Yeah, right.
plenty of men in Seattle were fucking other men and having wives and stuff like that, and they just weren't putting labels on it, buddy. like this really is like the uptightedness about it is really a new thing. Like that was not always the case.
Yeah. And I think, again, this is touching on her gatekeeping, especially this next paragraph. We even had a name for this phenomenon back then, lesbian until graduation. And studies have confirmed that it does exist.
Maybe the fact that
We caught
you
Bigfoot.
told your friends that they were just lesbians until
Yeah.
graduation and that was the culture they were in might have had some fucking effect on how they fucking live the rest of their lives. You ever think about any of this shit, Katie?
Totally. Like, that's
Jesus.
so obvious.
None of this shit is in a vacuum. Sorry, you were going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I was just gonna say like we can just pile on the fact that she's biphobic as well.
Yeah.
From judging this article, like her being like upset that her friends are married to men.
Yeah.
Like clearly you could still it's infuriating.
To her, I guess you can pick only one. Is that like one thing
Yeah.
What?
you can ever be?
Well,
Why?
don't worry. We're going to find out where she sits on the Kinsey scale
yeah.
later
Oh,
in this
exactly.
article.
I forgot that comes
Well,
up.
and the conservative
It's my favorite
side
part.
of the like LGBTQ community, right, adopted all those you can only be one things when they started like delving into like race science shit, where they're like, oh, there's a gay gene, just gotta find it or whatever,
Right.
and like not thinking for a second of like, if you really popularize this idea of like there's a gay gene, you're basically just popularizing like genocide, right? Like because there's a gay gene, we could just wipe it out, bro. But yeah, like that's awful. It's a right-wing frame from the beginning. It's crazy.
That's our girl, Katie. A 2003 study, for instance, interviewed young, self-declared, non-heterosexual women over a 5-year period and found that a quarter of respondents no longer identified as lesbian or bisexual. Of those, half reclaimed heterosexual identities and half gave up all identity labels. Interestingly, only one of these formerly queer women, according to the study authors, considered her non-heterosexual period, here it comes, a phase.
Oh, and that's what happens when you self-identify.
Well, and part of it too is that like, one, no consideration that maybe these people live in a society that might push them to like some of these conclusions, or the idea that like maybe there's this weird thing that when people are like 16 to 20, whatever, that maybe they're exploring their sexuality and something like that. There's no room for that either, right? Like, it's just, again.
It's not a big deal if like one day you're like, oh, like I'm totally gay, and the next day you're like, I'm not so gay. Like, it's not a huge fucking deal.
Though it might
Like, who
contribute
cares?
to the concept that straightness doesn't really make sense, and you need to some way to say that you are not straight.
We're also just like the fact that like we were just pressured into being straight.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah. I mean, and I think that gets to the point of like this whole straight identity is literally in the last 100 years creation, right? Of like this hardcore idea of like is born in the era of eugenics and stuff. The idea of like you're born this way, and the thing is like, maybe it's good to start pushing back on that after 100 years of seeing the like horrors that this kind of shit has wrought. Maybe it's good to push back on that and be like, maybe there's actually social identities and not like things you're born with, right? Yeah. And in which case, maybe giving kids the room to explore it is actually not the worst thing on the planet. Like,
No, the kids are wrong.
Yeah, exactly. I'll tell you what, like the high school kids I teach or whatever are way more open about this stuff and are clearly way more in an exploratory phase. I got to tell you, that's infinitely healthier than the high school I went to in the 1990s.
Yeah, good Lord.
Where identifying as queer or whatever would have gotten the shit kicked out of you every day. And I don't see the positives that Katie is seeing, I guess, and going back to that.
No,
like,
that was a terrible time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Terrible time. Rather, the rest emphasized changes in how they interpreted or acted on their attractions. This shows us that self-identification, at least among some people, fluctuates over time. But other studies have found that attraction is basically stable throughout our lives. Those who are exclusively same-sex attracted in youth will likely be same-sex attracted as adults. And the same is true of exclusively opposite-sex attractions as well. Anyone who has gone through conversion therapy can likely attest that you can try to change who you are attracted to, but it probably won't work. But while attractions may be stable, labels are not. And the expanding definition of the word queer has, I suspect, increased the self-described LGBTQ population by a lot.
So if you weren't following the math of all that, it adds up to nothing. Absolutely nothing.
No, nothing.
No, she just said nothing.
This is the
Just-
both sidesism thing.
She really loves the self-identification like thing.
Well,
Let's say putting it that way.
Well, she goes on the self-identification thing, and she refuses to get into any of the, again, politics of it, that like maybe people self-identify as things for different reasons, right? Like this is not like good evidence, basically.
Well, she's
is what it comes down
implying
to,
that like she like she's implying that like she can't like self-identifying is like some people can self-identify. She's implying that she has no choice in being gay, so she doesn't have like the luxury of self-identifying.
Right.
It's basically what she's implying.
Well, because what she says there is right. Like studies show that most people who are blah 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 and kids, and it's like again, it's the classic Katie. Like, yeah, okay, your study, whatever study you're quoting,
that you
didn't
just
say
Googled.
all people. Didn't say all people. First of all, so this means nothing.
Right.
Yeah, what she's saying is she's like, I know the technology does not yet exist, but when it does, I will be able to take a blood test and it will say lesbian on it. And that makes me gay and you not, you know?
Yeah. Well, I think the thing is that, again, this sort of project of like, the straight nuclear family and all this kind of stuff, it's like it can be accepting of a certain like vision of like gayness, right? But it does have to accept it in that hard line kind of way of like, look, kids, if they're attracted to same-sex people, that is a hard line. Their blood test says they're gay forever or whatever. And it has no consideration of maybe there's like social factors, right? Like maybe there's like social impact. Maybe kids actually don't know anything about anything when they're kids, right? Yeah. And, are exploring what's been made available to them by the world they grew into, right? I imagine like queer identity as we imagine it today would be a very strange thing to explain to somebody in the 1950s, but it doesn't necessarily mean that like we have created a genetically new race of people, right? You know, like, it just means the social world is different than it was in the 1950s.
Yeah,
Which is not a bad
and
thing.
that there's a
Yeah, that's
political
good.
element to it.
Yeah.
You know, that again, Katie just totally misses. But
Yeah.
what do we got here?
All right. And why not identify as queer, especially if it doesn't need to reflect who you fuck? In some environments, there.
She's bitter. She's
Oh,
getting
yeah.
she's getting angry now.
Yeah,
All I want to do is just say fuck you the
Yeah.
entire time that
Yeah.
you're reading this.
Just please do that.
She-
Just jump in with a fuck you
I'll
anytime.
just say fuck you whenever I feel like it's
She
appropriate.
has
Yeah,
that
do
effect
that.
on
Do that.
people. In some environments, there are real social benefits to adopting this label. This isn't to say that bigotry and homophobia don't still exist. They do. People still get shunned from their families and kicked out of their homes for their sexual orientation. My own girlfriend's parents took nearly 4 years to meet me in person, and I have friends whose sexuality is so taboo that their families just pretend that it's not happening.
That had nothing to do with Katie being gay or her girlfriend being gay. That's just a Katie thing. They just read her writing.
This is the to be sure portion of the article.
Yeah. Anti-queer
Also, fuck you.
yeah. Prejudice might be rare or invisible in progressive communities like Evergreen State, but it's hardly extinct, especially among deeply conservative and religious communities. People are killed or imprisoned for being gay all over the world, even in 2020. But
Yes.
Oh god, that was a classic to be sure.
yeah, good Lord. In some places, in some communities, especially young ones, being queer is undeniably cool.
Oh.
Hell yeah, where's my skateboard?
Other things that are cool. Not being a racist, also cool. Not a reason to be a racist. Because you don't want to be follow the crowd. Like other cool bandwagons to jump on, or jump off maybe. Race science, eugenics, again, encouraging Katie here. Yeah, I mean, like this, I really resent because again, it is the politics of it, right? Like, yes, it's to the extent, maybe there is some truth to that it is, I don't want to give her the credit here, but like, and I think it's a bad frame, but like to some extent it is because it's not a taboo. Maybe there is something cool because it's empowering about, being out as yourself as a kid.
I mean, being queer is cool as shit.
Yeah, it's very cool.
I will admit to that. It's cool as fuck.
But like,
Y'all wish you were as cool as
part
that.
of that is because there is a political element here. That there is a movement to make change, and it is cool to not be on the wrong side of history. Okay, it is cool to not be looking back with some conservative frame, and like shaking your fist at the clouds.
Yeah.
I just like. It's lame. It's lame to be uptight about this shit.
Yeah, and ultimately this is like a weird bad apples kind of take that she has. Like, basically, there are people identifying as queer who aren't really queer. And that's the problem, which I remember also hearing in the 90s about like homosexuality,
Yeah, it's just it's a phase.
yeah.
It's not.
which is delegitimizing everyone.
Oh yeah.
Like, if I've had so many friends, like, specifically, like, I have bi friends who have experienced so much bullshit from people within the community for being bi. And it's horseshit. Like, being like Katie's being a gatekeeper. Like, she's saying she's not, but she's being a gatekeeper. And being a gatekeeper is being a fucking cop. Like, you don't police people's fucking sexuality at all. Like, that's not something you ever fucking do. And this is exactly this is she's doing this in this entire article.
Yeah.
Yeah, you completely nailed it. I mean, that is her thing. She is like her worldview cop in some weird, perverse part of her brain. She has to like see justice
no, it's the mind of the pedant, right?
Yeah,
Because
right.
It
The
has like a whole
textualist.
like language.
When
thing
she throws
too,
the
which
book
is
at you, it's the dictionary.
Yeah, and it's the whole thing of like if you're not living a life that's like roughly exactly like mine,
Yeah,
whatever,
yeah.
then I don't have a problem with you. And it's
She's like a queer Judge Dredd.
Yeah. There you
Oh,
go.
sorry, not queer. I'm sorry, Katie.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
that, and
I'm sorry I called you
also she could never. She wishes she was badass like Judge Dredd. Yeah.
Take, for instance, now we're going to go to media, The Good Place actress Jamila Jamil, who responded to being widely dragged on social media for some perceived sin against the LGBTQ community recently by coming out as queer. As for what that means exactly, who knows? Maybe it means she's attracted to women. Maybe it means she pegs her straight boyfriend. So, yeah, this is
what I think the actual article is about. Because I remember when she tweeted this. And I feel like this article came from a dumb joke that she made where she posted a picture of Jamil and James Blake and then made like a joke about like, I guess James Blake is trans. And it's like, I feel like the entire article is just basically her reacting
Like,
to
yuck.
just to that like trending Twitter topic.
Well, and it's like, I mean, such a hilarious thing too that she's just so concerned about like exactly what makes Jamil queer or whatever. Like this thing that has no impact on her life whatsoever. But yeah.
No, she
Also,
wants
like-
to be able to measure it with a caliper.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it's just like, who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Like, who cares?
This thing that has like zero impact on your
Fucking
life.
stop it, cop.
This is extremely gay marriage will devalue the institution
yeah.
of marriage.
Completely,
okay?
yeah. Oh, yeah.
That it is exactly that. I mean, this like my Nazi mother like marched in rallies holding banners like to for the sanctity of the institution of marriage, right? And like that, and it's like the obvious retort is, oh, this isn't going to have any effect on your marriage, you dumb fuck. It's exactly that. That is who you are, Katie.
Yeah.
You are a conservative fucking troll.
Hack.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And fuck you.
Yeah, fuck you.
Fuck you. Both now fall under the label of queer, in quotes. Or take this story I heard from a university instructor, not at Evergreen State. So again, a real thing that happened to her.
Yeah, exactly. My cab driver on the way home from the airport said.
She told me that in one of her first year classes, there are 3 trans or non-binary students and about a dozen students who identify as queer. And that's in a class of just 23.
So half again. Like,
Yeah. I know this about them because they told me and the rest of their classmates in their introductions, she said, adding that when the class conversation turned to identity one day, an older student asked why so many people identify as queer now and was informed by a classmate that identifying as straight is a way to oppress others. In this thinking, the only moral identification is queer or sexually fluid because that's the only way to be truly inclusive.
So she utters this as, as dismissively as she can. I mean, we know what we're supposed to take away from this, that this is an absurd idea.
Sure.
This is not possible for all people, of course, and no one has an obligation to be inclusive with their bodies. If you are a 0, exclusively heterosexual, or a 6, exclusively homosexual, on the Kinsey scale, your sexuality isn't fluid at all.
So we've revealed here that like what we've been trying to nail down like what is her conception of what is okay, what is queerness, what is
It's the Kinsey scale.
It's the Kinsey scale, literally based on the first research ever done on sexuality ever, and put out in what, like 1950,
Something like that, yeah.
So that she's like, that's good enough. That covers me.
Yeah.
That's
well,
it.
you know,
You
it
can look
descri-
it up in the dictionary.
Yeah, exactly. It described all 4 humors, and I don't think we need to go much
You can
further
look it up
past that.
easily on Wikipedia. You can watch a movie about it.
Hell yeah,
Okay,
you
like
can.
she doesn't actually have to go to the research and figure out what's relevant now and what is,
According to the Kinsey scale, you could be a Liam Neeson to
Studies have found that females tend to be more... This is where she also just kind of like... her brain seeps out of her head or something. Like it just trails off. Studies have found that females tend to be more sexually fluid than males, but we don't yet know what exactly determines someone's sexual orientation. Though it's probably some combination of biological, environmental, and cultural factors. But what we do know is that the old definition of queer no longer means what it used to. if it means anything at all.
Oh, just asking questions. I want to go back to the kid who said, like, straightness is a
Oppressive.
way of oppressing people. Again, she does not engage with any of the just, you know, so much culture and thought she could engage in here and people's lives that is available out there. You could talk to people, you know, in this new paradigm that has developed, this society that hopefully will continue to grow, that allows people to live out their lives in ways that they choose, with their sexuality, with their gender. The idea of straightness, again, what Brian was saying, that it's actually this new thing from 100 years ago. It's as we are shedding these sort of limitations and people are identifying in all these new ways, the idea of straightness becomes stranger and stranger, narrower and narrower, weirder and more unlikely, because there is such a range of people out there who are living outside of a gender normative or heteronormative life. And
I have a feeling that, like, if, like, normally in somebody that is Katie's age, she would be friends with somebody who was agender, be somebody who was genderqueer, be somebody who was pansexual, asexual. She would, like, have a better understanding of these nuances. But unfortunately, she's Katie Herzog, so she doesn't have any of those friends.
I mean, that is exactly it, right? Because it is about the other people around. Because that's the case, when you know all of those people, when you're living in a society when there are trans people, trans non-binary people, people with all different gender and sexual identities, straightness becomes this limited, unlikely thing that essentially is, we can see now, to be artificial. And so to cling to it, to really, like, to aggressively claim it, is to claim this older, oppressive social form that this society is trying to shed, right? And so that's a political decision, to not want to claim that. And, you know, that's one that I've been having conversations about over the last year and 6 months, about not wanting to claim that straightness, about not being straight. And so this time it's personal for me with Katie, because I've stopped, like, identifying as a straight person, partially because of this thing that she dismisses, this political thing, like, realization that this is a dead form. Like, these guys, they're in life-term relationships with women, so, like, we can give them a pass. I mean, Brian's not technically married yet, but it's on the calendar, so
Living in sin.
So we can give them a pass on, like, clinging to their straight identities. But, like, you know, for me, a single person, like, and a politically aware person who doesn't want to cling to an older oppressive form, I'm not going to do that. But it's not just political. For me, it's personal, because, of course, I know in my life that I'm not strictly interested in or attracted to this narrow, again, increasingly ridiculously narrow gender normative and heteronormative situation. I know from experience that I am attracted to and interested in people outside of that narrowing realm. And so that becomes, then there's another element to it that is, you know, so one that matters the least, probably, like a self-actualization or something. Like, just, it happens to be true about myself, and I know that in this, it's something people should think about, because I know, and again, there's just so many layers of this that Katie just doesn't get to. I know that I have, because of, you know, I'm a cis man who is, you know, an older millennial who, you know, so I've, all the rest of my life, I've casually identified as straight and not thought much of it. But I know that, you know, because I have a curiosity, and because I do know people outside of, you know, gender normativity, unlike Katie, evidently, I've had to examine these things. But I also know, so there, there's this other element to it that I know that I have been trying to flirt with or date at some point someone who does not fit that strict fall within that strict zone.
Yeah.
At a time when it was known out in the universe, whether accessible to this person, that I casually identified as straight. And what that, when I look back on that, I feel shitty about that, because I think I don't know how if at all it was interpreted by, in this way, but, or even known, but I imagine, how dismissive that is of that person and hurtful.
Yeah.
Because it says, if you're not thinking about this, it says to someone, well, I don't take you seriously as a human being, so it really doesn't matter. I can be straight and you can be whatever. Or I don't take your gender identity or whatever it is seriously.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. Again, so how I identify doesn't matter. And that's something in this new paradigm, this beautiful, freeing, inclusive new paradigm. If you're not thinking about things that way, I think you're putting yourself in a position to be that guy, and that's I think it's hurtful. At the very least, it shows you haven't done like the work and introspection on yourself.
Yeah.
Which again, I have been guilty of in the past. So this is very personal to me, because I'm in this ill thought out slow roll of identifying as not straight, as a queer person, Katie. You wretched person.
Like, by the way, all the things that you just said, tight. All that was tight. I just wanted to validate that.
Oh, thank you.
It was all tight.
Yeah, hard to follow up. But
Yeah. I will say that like sexuality is supposed to be malleable.
Yeah.
It's supposed to ebb and flow. And I think a lot of people associate the term straight as being unmalleable, being fixed.
Yeah.
So I say fuck it. I have friends who thought of themselves as straight cis dudes who end up dating somebody who is gender nonconforming.
Yeah.
And that is a queer relationship.
Exactly.
Sure.
It's just what it is. And Katie can have a fucking conniption about it, because we all know how much Katie loves non-binary people. But sexuality should be considered as a malleable thing.
Yeah.
Well, and especially in a world where people are getting ever more sort of alienated, whether, on the job, at home, right? The idea that, people's love lives opening up to new possibilities.
Yeah.
The idea of hating on that in some way just seems it's just kicking people while they're down. In a lot of ways, we want to make you as socially isolated as possible. We want to cut off every avenue of human interaction you can possibly have, it just seems particularly gross in the modern context.
Yeah. As you said, cop shit. That's cop shit.
Yeah.
The fucking
Cop shit.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it's cop shit. And, we love cops on this podcast.
Yeah. But, and I think just hammering home that, heteronormativity is a political project, right? That's what Katie's defending here, even if she's not wanting to explicitly say it, because she's a fucking coward and devious and all this other kind of stuff.
And dumb.
Even if she doesn't know, that is what she's doing.
Yeah.
If we gave her the benefit of the doubt, which we shouldn't, that is what she's doing.
She has, as we talked about off air, she has a psychological, instinctive conservatism that she doesn't necessarily even understand, but she can see it in the world and she knows how to regurgitate it. You know?
Yeah. Also, it just comes from her own goddamn insecurities. She's just projecting her goddamn insecurities onto everybody. Whether it be her transphobia or be her envyphobia, which she's admitted on Twitter.
Yes, you showed us the screenshot.
I've got
screen saved again.
Wait, let me pull it up. I think she was saying something during Trans Day Remembrance, and in the thread she was apparently defending herself from people accusing her of transphobia. And then within the same thread goes, if you want to call me envyphobic, that's fair. I think it's bad.
Yeah.
Fuck you.
Fuck you.
Herzog.
God, what
Which
a
is
wretched
like,
human
where's
being.
the line? Like, where's the line between I'm not transphobic but ambiphobic? Yeah, that's the shoe I want to wear.
Yeah.
Like,
Again, like it stopped in 1950 with Kinsey. You know,
Yeah.
like there's no, like, imagine being someone who, in sort of the epic of your own life, your own like sexual identity went from being like a major taboo to something that doesn't negatively impact your life at all, and not thinking, maybe like other things could be like that, and I just, just no fucking curiosity or empathy.
yeah.
Unbelievable.
No, and you nailed it. Like, she has like zero empathy because she can't. Because like she's afraid of the things that she hates.
Well,
Yeah.
and she has, and I think she's
God, I hate her so
mentioned.
much.
So she, of course,
sucks?
fled the city. She, of course, fled the city and lives on a compound on the peninsula or whatever. But
in no small part due to the Sticker Brigade.
Yeah,
Well,
hell
what can
yeah.
I say?
there you
Do
go.
God's work.
Thank you for your service, Colonel.
Hey, collective action works. It gets good.
I am saluting.
Personal harassment works.
Yeah,
people.
exactly.
Like,
Yeah, it's praxis, you know.
Exactly. But and I think she's even mentioned that she just kind of like lives out there with like much older people.
Yeah, yeah.
But she has a very older vibe, right? So, and I printed out like the last 3 articles that she wrote. So she wrote this one too, which you get very much picture like some 70-year-old going, well, in my day we had to. But her other one was a piece on Bernie Bros, where she was just like, look, guys, it's time to get a lot nicer online. You're being too mean or whatever. And then the piece before that, which I think really says it all, because this is the trifecta of pieces, is another study casts doubt on effectiveness of trigger warnings, which is just another, those campus radicals are out of control piece. And it's all like 70-year-old grandfather shit. And like, it's the craziest shit. It's like, how fucking old is Katie Herzog? And she...
her latest Campus Radicals one is pretty funny too.
Yeah.
Like, because the one she's defending is like the
Oh my God.
The
That
campus-
UT one?
Oh, that was a
Wasn't
Twitter
that-
special.
wasn't that UT?
Yeah, that was a Twitter special. She was defending the guy at UT who's a classics professor, which means he's already a freak. But who was basically apparently making the argument in class and elsewhere, which, maybe isn't deserving of getting fired, but it's certainly fucking weird.
questionable.
That, basically was like, oh, hey, man, in ancient Greece, a society that we know was very equal and very cool. Like, dudes, had sex with young boys or whatever. So I'm just saying, guys. Like,
It's time to revisit the age of consent, specifically.
it's time to revisit the age of consent.
For men only, not for women. That's part of
because women were too stupid to make that kind of decision.
Yeah,
And
A million red flags on this guy,
a lot.
right?
It was amazing. And she,
and she was
great.
going in on like, look, that shows her libertarian side though, is that she's an enemy of it.
Yeah.
The one
what it
standard that
shows
should follow
is-
is age of consent laws.
What it shows is what her fucking playlist is.
Yeah,
okay?
yeah.
What is she is just getting? What is in her RSS feed, whatever, like what her bookmarks are, because she's getting bombarded with that's like, normal thing I'm going to put on Twitter. At this esoteric free speech like campus like SJW snowflake defense like of this weird guy who's like, we need to bring back slave pederasty.
Yeah. Well, and then he had this gripe. He was basically like, I'm getting roasted by normies. This conversation, this discourse is so uncivil and it's not academic.
It was really funny. But
Yeah,
that just shows you like
was about where Katie's at.
where her what's on her radar.
Yeah.
I feel like she only has like 4 things she talks about and just tries to think of like this a different way to say it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. She's been writing the same piece over and over again. I think she has like a generator, like where she puts the butt and like where she puts the,
She has a Katie lib.
It's it's GPT-2. I almost, before the show, tried to get all her articles and run it through that, but then I didn't. We should try that out.
Yeah, see if we can generate our own
See what
Katie
new
pieces.
transphobia we can unearth.
I mean, the smug, disingenuous incuriosity of this person. Absolutely wretched.
Yeah, fuck you, Katie.
Yeah, fuck you, Katie.
Fuck you, Katie. Fucking cop.
And also, shout out, I guess, to the LGBT community that also apparently by yelling at her in bars forced her to leave as well. So just a real team effort all around
100%.
just to get it to go away.
I will say when we started doing the stickers, I can't tell you how many people were so stoked on it, and I can't tell you how many people asked for those stickers. We got a stack that we left at Left Bank for anybody shopping at Left Bank, and then Katie she found like my proxy email somehow and tried to like get a scoop and try to like, let me talk to you. I'm sure you know where my job is, which is because her job was really close to where I work. So every day I would put a new sticker on the stranger box that sits outside, and every day it would get ripped off. So the next day I would just like put a new one. Like
Hell
every
yeah.
day. And I just kept on doing it because I knew it drove her crazy.
But she doesn't go into the office now.
No.
What I love her like offering you interview too, like that's like let me give you a fair interview instead of just like me like egregiously misquoting you for a page.
Well,
you know?
So I just ended up responding with just like, yeah, sure, totally. Let's totally talk about this.
Yeah.
And just doing the image of the pig shitting on its balls.
Yes.
So she posted it on Twitter because I knew that's where that was going.
Yeah.
Em, thank you so much for being here. It was a real
definitely.
pleasure to have you.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much.
We really appreciate
awesome
it.
to have your
Yeah.
your insight into the nemesis.
Like I said, we're always supporting the troops on this boat, so welcome anytime, right?
Yeah, well, you can see all the yellow ribbons in the cabin.
I need to fold up this flag real quick.
Before we go, was there anything that you might want to plug? Or I know there's
Well, the only thing I will say is that we have had people asking for stickers that are not the 3 people that follow Katie Herzog, but there will be some coming up. There'll be some available. We'll probably find some at Left Bank in the Pike Place Market, or just email Katie Herzog is a turf at Gmail.
There you go.
Yeah.
Amen. All right, awesome.
Before we go to that, though, can I just do a shout out to the 2 Bernie canvassers that came to my door this morning and saw me looking crazy with Wolverine hair and shit? I've met both of you at events before, and if you guys happen to listen to the show, DM us because I do want to know how canvassing in my neighborhood went. So yeah, definitely DM us so I can hit you up.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, actually, I keep meaning to say this, but anyone who actually listens to the show, if you're following us on Twitter, but we're not following you back, like, please shoot me a DM so I can.
Yeah.
'cause, like,
I try. I try. I'm not on Twitter that
Yeah,
much.
but it's hard to know.
To suss out for sure. Yeah, do that. So yeah, we don't have any patrons to thank, unfortunately. If you're not a patron already, we've got a lot of stuff. Maybe even some Katie Herzog stuff in the back catalogs, I think. So for just $5 a month.
Yeah, we should link to the previous Katie episode so you can do it as like a series, a Katie mini series.
But that is like Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse Now kind of confrontation of.
Yeah, no, I mean your brain will never be the same.
But yes, we'll do that. So we have 2 actual other plugs to do here really quickly. So me, Colin, I will be a part of a podcasting panel Q&A where we will talk about the art, the craft, the calling of podcasting. Put on by friend of the show, Jason Rigdon, under the aegis of the Seattle Podcasters Guild brand. Sorry, Jason. In the Ballard Meeting Room at the Ballard Library on March 8th at 12 p.m. And we also want to say, go see Clueless at Chateau Ste. Michelle Winery March 28th at 7 p.m. with the Deadbeat Film Society.
Yeah.
Because that movie rules and they rule.
They're very cool.
Yeah. All right. Until next time.
Yeah, thanks again, Em.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.